My sister plotted to steal my house by cheating with my husband, but she didn't know I owned everything. I'm 34. I never thought I'd find myself here, betrayed by the two people I trusted most in the world, my husband and my sister. Even now, months later, the pain still feels fresh when I think about how an act of kindness turned into the most devastating chapter of my life. It started last month when my phone rang. It was my mom, her voice tight with worry. "Honey, we need to talk about Beth," she said. She's not doing well." I listened as she explained how my younger sister, at 28, had hit rock bottom. Her company had unexpectedly shut down, leaving her jobless. Then, as if fate hadn't been cruel enough, she contracted West Nile virus. The medical bills were piling up, and she could barely get out of bed some days. "I know it's a lot to ask," Mom hesitated, "but could you maybe help her out? Just until she gets back on her feet." I glanced around my spacious home, thinking about the spare bedroom that rarely saw use. "Of course," I replied without hesitation. "She can stay with us." When I brought it up with my husband, Frank, that evening, he seemed supportive. "That's what family does," he said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "We help each other." Oh, how those words would come back to haunt me. The day Beth moved in, I remember standing in the driveway as our parents' car pulled up, watching my sister emerge looking like a shadow of herself. She was terribly pale and thin, dark circles under her eyes, making her look almost ghostly. Her usually perfectly styled hair hung limp around her face, and she seemed to struggle with even the small overnight bag she carried. Mom hovered anxiously as Dad helped bring in the rest of Beth's things. "She barely eats," she whispered to me. "The doctors say the virus really took a toll on her immune system. She needs rest, good food, and time to recover." I watched Frank carry Beth's suitcases upstairs, noting how gently he handled them, how he asked her if she needed anything else. At the time, I interpreted it as kindness. How naive I was. I helped her settle into the guest room, arranging her medications on the nightstand. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You've always been the best big sister anyone could ask for." I hugged her tightly. "You just focus on getting better, okay?" The first few weeks were actually nice. I'd wake up early to make her breakfast before heading to my home office. She'd spend most days resting, and in the evenings, we'd all have dinner together. Frank would often stay up late with her watching movies while I worked on client projects. "You two seem to be getting along well," I commented one evening, pleased to see my sister laughing at one of his jokes. "He's been really supportive," Beth smiled. "It's nice having someone to talk to during the day." I should have seen the signs. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The way they seemed to share private jokes. But I was too busy with work, too trusting, too blind. Then came that fateful day. Beth asked for family meeting, and I assumed she was finally ready to move out. We gathered in the living room, me on the couch, Frank in his usual armchair, Beth standing nervously by the fireplace. "I have something to tell you," she started, wringing her hands. I'm pregnant." The words didn't register at first. Then she continued, and my world shattered. "Your husband and I have been seeing each other," she said, her voice steady despite my visible shock. "We've fallen in love." I turned to Frank, hoping to see denial on his face. Instead, I saw guilt. Pure, undeniable guilt. But Beth wasn't finished. With an audacity that still astounds me, she straightened her shoulders and said, "I think it would be best if you moved out. The baby needs a stable environment, and this is already set up as a family home." The room spun. 8 years of marriage, 5 years of supporting his writing dreams, countless moments of trust and love, all destroyed in an instant. But I refused to let them see me break. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice ice cold. "This is my house. Everything here, the furniture, the art, the mortgage, it's all in my name. If anyone's leaving, it's you too." Frank shifted uncomfortably.
"She's right, Beth.
"I should have told you." Beth's face contorted with rage. Told me what? That you're not the successful writer you claim to be? That you've been living off her money while pretending to be some anonymous literary genius? The truth came pouring out. For 4 years, I'd supported his dream of becoming a writer. He'd contributed nothing financially, spending his days working on his novel while I paid all the bills. He'd apparently spun quite a different story for my sister. You told me you were managing everything. Beth screamed at him. You said you were just keeping your success private. I wanted to impress you, he mumbled, looking smaller by the minute. I watched their argument with a detached fascination. Frank quietly packed a bag, knowing our marriage was over. But Beth refused to accept defeat. She fell to her knees in front of me, grabbing my hands. Please, I'm carrying your niece or nephew, she begged. I have nowhere else to go. You can't throw me out. I yanked my hands away. Watch me. What happened next still feels surreal. I physically pulled her to her feet and marched her to her room. I threw her clothes into suitcases, her belongings into boxes. When she refused to leave, I started placing everything on the front porch. You have 30 minutes before I call the police for trespassing, I informed her calmly. She stood on my porch for an hour, crying and pleading. I put on noise-canceling headphones and ignored her until she finally left. I poured myself a large glass of wine and called my lawyer, Sarah, who'd been my friend since college. I need to start divorce proceedings, I said, my voice trembling slightly. What happened? She asked, concern evident in her voice. Last time we had lunch, everything seemed fine. I laughed bitterly and told her everything. She listened quietly, occasionally cursing under her breath. What a jerk, she finally said. And your sister? I'm so sorry. I'll file everything first thing tomorrow morning. Don't worry about a thing. We'll make sure you're protected. After hanging up with Sarah, I took a deep breath and called my parents. I expected support, understanding, maybe even anger on my behalf. Instead, I got lectures. She's your sister. My mother cried. She's pregnant and vulnerable. She's also a homewrecker who betrayed me, I countered. But the baby, my father started, is not my responsibility, I cut him off. If you're so concerned, you can take her in. They didn't, of course. They just continued guilt-tripping me from a distance. 2 months passed. Then came the news of Beth's supposed miscarriage. My parents were quick to blame me. Are you happy now? My mother sobbed over the phone. The stress you caused made her lose the baby. I hung up on her. I was done being their emotional punching bag. I threw myself into work, trying to keep busy. My friends rallied around me, bringing food, checking in regularly, making sure I wasn't alone unless I wanted to be. My best friend Kate even offered to hire someone to key my ex's car, which made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Then one evening, Frank, soon-to-be ex-husband, called. I stared at his name on my phone screen, debating whether to answer. Something told me I should. There was never a baby. His voice was quiet over the phone. I've been thinking about it. All her excuses when I asked to go to doctor's appointments, how she never had any ultrasound photos. It was all lies. I sat there in my kitchen, gripping my coffee mug, so tight my knuckles turned white. The strange thing was, I felt more tired than shocked. You know what's even worse? He continued hesitantly. I did some digging. I called the hospital where she claimed to have been treated. They have no record of her ever being there for West Nile virus. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Suddenly, everything clicked into place like a twisted jigsaw puzzle. It was all a con, wasn't it? I heard myself say. From the very beginning. The mysterious illness moving in with us, the pregnancy, she planned it all. I think so, he sighed. She saw how successful you were, how comfortable your life seemed. She wanted it for herself. And God, I was such an idiot. She played me perfectly, the vulnerable little sister who needed saving. I started laughing then, a hollow sound that echoed through my empty kitchen. My own sister had orchestrated this elaborate scheme to steal my life. first worming her way into my home with a fake illness, then trying to force me out with a fake pregnancy. The sheer calculation of it made me feel physically sick. The fallout was spectacular. My parents, finally seeing Beth for who she really was, cut ties with her. One Sunday morning, my parents showed up at my door unannounced, carrying my favorite childhood breakfast, blueberry pancakes and hot chocolate. My mother's eyes were red from crying. "We were wrong," she said softly. "So terribly wrong. We should have believed you, should have supported you." My father, a proud man who I'd never seen cry, had tears in his eyes. "We failed you, sweetheart. We let our worry for Beth blind us to how much she hurt you. Can you ever forgive us?" I looked at their hopeful faces, at the breakfast they'd brought as a peace offering, and felt a complicated mix of love and pain. Part of me wanted to throw my arms around them and cry, to let them comfort me like they used to when I was little. But another part remembered how quickly they'd turned on me, how easily they'd believed the worst. "I love you both," I said carefully, "and I appreciate you coming here. But they tried to destroy my life, and you took their side. You blamed me for a fake miscarriage. You called me heartless for protecting myself. That's not something I can just forget over pancakes." My mother started crying again.
"We know, baby.
"We know. We hope you'll give us a chance to make it right." "I need time," I replied. "I'm not saying no forever, but right now I need space to heal." They nodded, understanding but clearly heartbroken. Mom left the pancakes on the counter, and they quietly showed themselves out. The damage was done, and all the blueberry pancakes in the world couldn't fix it overnight. "I appreciate the gesture," I told them during their attempt at reconciliation, "but I need time. You chose to believe the worst of me without question. That's not something I can just forget." A week after the pregnancy lie came out, Frank showed up at my door. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same wrinkled shirt I'd seen him in at the lawyer's office. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Please." Against my better judgment, I let him in. We stood awkwardly in the entryway, him shifting from foot to foot, me with my arms crossed, maintaining a safe distance. "I know I don't deserve it," he started, his voice cracking. "But if there's any chance, any possibility we could try again." He ran his hands through his unwashed hair. I was an idiot. The biggest idiot in the world. What I did with Beth, there's no excuse. But our 8 years together, they meant everything to me. Still means everything. I studied his face, the face I'd woken up to for 8 years, the face I'd once trusted more than any other in the world. And I felt nothing. Just a hollow emptiness, where love used to be. "You slept with my sister," I said flatly. "Under my roof. While I was working to support us, you were betraying me with my own blood.
There's no coming back from that."
"I know," he whispered, tears forming in his eyes.
"I know that.
Please leave," I cut him off. "Some things can't be fixed. Some betrayals run too deep." He nodded slowly, shoulders slumping. At the door, he turned back one last time.
"I'm sorry."
"For everything." "So am I replied, closing the door on 8 years of marriage and one unforgivable betrayal. Later that night, my friend called to check on me. "Did you consider it?"
she asked.
"Taking him back." "Not for a second," I replied. How could I ever trust him again? Every time he'd be late coming home, every time he'd look at his phone, I'd wonder. And the fact that it was Beth. There are some things you just can't come back from. Now, months later, I'm rebuilding my life piece by piece. The divorce is almost final, and I've redecorated the house, erasing all traces of my past life. Sometimes, late at night, I still catch myself wondering how I missed the signs, how I could have been so blind. But then I remember something my grandmother used to say: sometimes people have to show you who they really are before you can move forward. Beth and Frank showed me exactly who they were. My parents showed me their true colors too. The betrayal nearly broke me, but it also taught me invaluable lessons about strength, self-worth, and the importance of standing your ground. I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about loyalty, respect, and trust. As for Beth, I heard she's living in another state now. My ex-husband has disappeared into obscurity, still working on that novel he'll probably never finish.
And me?
I'm focusing on my business, my friends, and most importantly, my peace of mind. People often ask if I'll ever forgive them. The truth is, I don't know. What I do know is that I'm stronger now than I've ever been. I've learned to trust my instincts, set boundaries, and put myself first. Sometimes betrayal doesn't just break you, it rebuilds you into someone better, stronger, and wiser. Later that night, as I walked through my peaceful home, now redecorated exactly as I wanted it, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different from the one who had naively welcomed her sister into her home all those months ago. She looked stronger, wiser, more confident. The future feels uncertain, but for the first time in months, it also feels full of possibility. I'm no longer the woman who blindly trusted everyone who claimed to love her. I'm someone new, someone who knows her worth and isn't afraid to stand alone if that's what it takes to maintain her dignity. As I sit here in my peaceful home, watching the sunset through my office window, I realize that sometimes the hardest chapters of our lives end up being the most important ones. They shape us, strengthen us, and ultimately lead us to where we're meant to be.